Secrets of Strixhaven brings us 5 new commander precons, one for each of the 5 schools of Strixhaven in enemy color combinations. And each one is looking to shake up what these color combinations do, doing fresh things and following the revitalization we saw from our first visit to the plane. But does the Quandrix Unlimited precon do anything new? On the surface, it's both +1/+1 counters and X cost spells, but is that anything that we haven't seen from Simic before? So let's break down the precon. We'll see how well it plays out of the box, we'll see how well it does with some upgrades, and we'll see what we can do to make it even better. The Quandrix Unlimited precon is what many would call Simic bullshit in a concise deck, offering 2 vectors of play: +1/+1 counters, yawn, boring, and X cost spells. And unlike some precons that follow 2 distinct paths, this one does manage to merge the 2 concepts pretty effectively. Both commanders in the deck care about +1/+1 counters, but only Zimone cares about X cost spells. Primo is, himself, an X cost spell, but synergizes more with your 0 base power creatures than with other X cost spells, meaning you've got some options for a rebuild, but not necessarily for an upgrade. The base deck comes packed with a handful of $5 reprints like Steelbane Hydra, Goldvein Hydra, and Guardian Augmenter, which all fit into other decks and brews. But importantly, reprints both 3 Visits and Nature's Lore into a single deck, immediately giving you 2 of the best ramp spells in the color in one brew. Good on you, Wizards, this is a great choice. And with that, you can grab the new blue-green lands in the deck, which are always great and popular, and have basic land types on them, meaning they can be fetched. A great starter package for baby's first blue-green deck. But that's not to mention some of the $10+ reprints like Ozolith the Shattered Spire, Unbound Flourishing, and Benevolent Hydra, all being readily available in the base deck. These make great additions to brews whether you're keeping this deck intact or tearing it apart. Some of the new cards from the list are excellent too, a lot of fun and fit into some other decks that are welcome role players. Expansion Algorithm is going to see play in every Super Friends deck ever from now on. Yavimaya Bloom Sage may not be the best of the prepared cycle, but if you can untap with a channel ready to go, you will win most games. And Nexus Mentality is going to draw someone tons of cards. It's just a shame that you can't target your Dark Depths with it. In playing the deck, I found that it was flexible and versatile, but I was often hanging on to X cost spells for most of the early game, really waiting to get maximum value out of them by having Zimone out. But Zimone with just 2 counters on her becomes a massive threat and is a removal magnet. I often found myself holding back casting her until I could also sandbag a counter spell or protection spell just to keep her safe. And when testing with Primo at the head of the deck, I found I was lacking for early game ramp. Nothing was letting me cast bigger and better spells. I was stuck casting Hydras for X=1 thanks to a lack of mana dorks getting me ahead of the curve. Things felt clunky and I really wanted Primo leading his own brew rather than this deck specifically. Overall, when the deck gets humming, it gets humming. But it needs time to get there, which some of the more aggressive decks of the Strixhaven precons can capitalize on well. For my personal rating of the deck, we don't get anything too unique here. This is basically a pared down version of the Tyrannid precon from Warhammer 40k, less the red from that deck's color identity. There are no infinite combos in the deck, meaning it can't stand toe-to-toe with those that do, but the overall value you get from the deck makes it worth picking up. I score the Quandrix Unlimited precon a solid B tier. It's not the best of the bunch, but if you want to dip your toes into the blue-green waters, this makes a solid pickup. Let's take a deeper look into our 2 new legends in the deck. Zimone, Infinite Analyst, in her 4th appearance on a card, and Primo the Unbound, a good dog. But let's look at Zimone first. This iteration is a 3-mana 0/4 human wizard that reads, the first spell you cast with X in its mana cost each turn costs X less to cast for each +1/+1 counter on Zimone. Whenever you cast your first spell with X in its mana cost each turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Zimone. So Zimone acts as an ever-growing cost discounter for your X cost spells. She really wants as many options as possible for X cost spells, but note she only discounts the first you play each turn. So if you're looking to cast 3 to 4 Hydras on a single turn for a single mana each, it's not going to work out the way that you want it to. But what will work the way that you want it to is casting an X spell on everyone else's turn, since her abilities aren't locked to just your turn. Here's where X spells with flash or instant speed X spells make a lot more sense, since you could reasonably untap and have Zimone discounting spells by 8 after a single turn cycle. But that's really all she does. She doesn't protect herself, and even carrying all of those counters, she's not a good attacker. She has no keywords, no evasion. So if you want to work to turn her into a win con on her own, you will have to make additions to the deck specifically for that reason. But you could use some +1/+1 counter related tricks to up the number of counters on her and increase that discount relatively easily. The upside of counters being that while they're boring, there are a lot of tools that you can work with and a lot of synergies out there. I don't see her going into the 99 of many decks outside of Magus Lucia Kane or Zexara the Exemplary, but that's still some places where she fits in. Now Primo, on the other hand, is an excellent non-Hydra Hydra. He costs X green blue for a 0/0 fractal wolf that says Trample. Primo enters with twice X +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever one or more creatures you control with base power 0 deal combat damage to a player, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the damage dealt. Now that right there is why I say he's a great Hydra. He cares about your 0 base power creatures, and all Hydras start as 0/0 creatures. The fact that he works with other fractals is great as well, since there are plenty of ways to make them, and Primo himself can make up to 3 of them each turn, 1 for each of your opponents, if you can connect with each of them with combat damage with a 0/0 base power creature. In addition to having Trample himself, he makes a great aggressive threat, especially with twice X counters on him. Sometimes he'll be a 2/2 for 4, sometimes he'll be a 4/4 for 5, but you'll likely want him to be a 6/6 for 6 more often than not. He's just good, that's the most I can say about him. He really does require a deck built around him though, where every creature is ideally a 0/0, tokens, hydras, oozes, whatever, just to get the big scaling goodness from him. He advances your board without having to cast a spell at all, which is always solid. The only negative thing I can say is that I don't think he's quite the best fit at the head of this Precon. The other X-cost spells in the deck don't really work in his direction unless they're X-cost creatures. The X-cost instants, sorceries, and enchantments don't do anything with him. Though I would love to brew up a Primo-led deck. Both commanders have their merits. I overall think Primo is the generically better legend, but Zimone enables this brew to work better. I don't think she's the best legend overall. Sure, she can swing eventually, and she can get chump blocked in most cases, and can enable your spells to ramp, but you'll have to do some real work to make that happen. She's the best bet to lead the Quandrix Unlimited Precon, however, and I'm keeping her at the head of the brew for now. Now, if I'm upgrading this deck, what am I removing and what am I adding? How do I swap cards and most effectively and efficiently make this even better? And the first thing that I want to do is improve the counter spells. For a deck that cares about X-cost spells, why are none of the counter spells X-cost? Decisive Denial and Quandrix Charm are interaction, but they're not interaction that synergizes with our game plan. They're counterspells for the sake of being a blue-green counterspell, even if each of them are versatile with other modes. They don't put more counters on Zimone, they don't trigger her abilities, and importantly, they don't scale later in the game. So instead, I want options like Syncopate, a simple X-cost counterspell that exiles the countered spell. It can be cast for X equals 1, or if you want to pitch it just to get Zimone's counters up, it can cost a single blue mana. What's ideal, however, is Spellburst, an X-mana counterspell that has buyback. And as we've learned from my Witherbloom the Balancer deck tech, discounting spells includes their buyback cost. This one counterspell can allow you to counter multiple spells each turn for a single blue mana once Zimone gets large enough, forming an almost lock on the game. But I'd also want to add in Repulsive Mutation 2. This is a perfect overlap of synergy as it adds counters to Zimone and is a counterspell. We could be using this to pump our commander and discount future spells and stop an opponent's game plan. In terms of other removals, I'd like both other Zimones cut from the list. I know why they're here, they're thematic and in some cases could ramp us, but they're more land-focused than spell-focused. Zimone All Questioning can do fine in a Primo-led deck, maybe, but even then the synergy overlap is tenuous at best. Quandrix Apprentice is also a subpar include, again in here largely because it's a Quandrix-themed deck, but for synergy there's a better addition in Secrets of Strixhaven called Geometer's Arthropod. For the same amount of mana, it triggers just on X cost spells, but it digs us deeper and can get us non-lands as well. This is an easy one-to-one swap for a little bit more oomph. I also think some of the deck's card draw, like Eureka Moment and Commander's Insight, aren't doing what we want them to do. They aren't scaling like we want, and costing way more than it's reasonable for the effect. Commander's Insight is likely far poorer scaling for the blue than a lot of other options. Other options like the straight replacement with Mind into Matter from Secrets of Strixhaven that I'm recommending to add to this deck. This costs overall 1 less, draws us the same amount of cards, and lets us dump a free permanent into play. The only trade-off is that it's not an instant, but in a deck tailored to X cost spells, this will be 2 mana for 4+ cards and a free permanent into play more often than not, a way better card than Commander's Insight. Marketback Walker also makes a great scaling card draw engine too. With Hangerback Walker already in the base list, the proof of concept is there. It functions as an X cost spell and works with all of our +1/+1 counter synergies too. The biggest upside being that, on death, it draws us a whole whack of new cards and refills our hand plus some more often than not. I'm also cutting Perplexing Test and Oversimplify from the deck. Yes, they are our best options for board wipes in these colors, but I really don't think that we should be wiping the board in these colors in this deck. If we fall behind, absolutely we should be wiping the board, but I'm hoping to tune the deck to the point where we can stay on par with more aggressive brews. I'd much rather include options to prevent us from falling behind rather than count on us falling behind. Remember, Zimone has no protection, and we either need to hold up counter spells or gotcha spells to save her. That's where Ripples of Potential, March of Swirling Mists, and Inspiring Call all come in. These effects either synergize with our +1/+1 counters or our X spells and protect Zimone and the rest of our board. If you can blank a single board wipe from an opponent, chances are you're untapping to win the game. Now my last cut is Troyan Gutsy Explorer. I think he's poo-poo garbage. A mana dork for large mana spells can be helpful, but at 3 mana he's not advancing your board state enough, and we can do better. Much better. I want to swap him out for Nexos from Warhammer 40,000. It's the deck's most expensive edition at about $10, but it doubles the mana your basic lands make to pay for X spells, which can ramp you far further ahead than Troyan's only ever 2 mana boost. This is a big single card addition to level up the deck. And these changes all pivot the deck hard into X spells, focusing it more where half of everything in the deck triggers Zimone and the other half benefits from her. The rest of the deck's inclusions help pump up your counters through Proliferate or by boosting your counters. The two directions don't always play well, but this brew finds that overlap nicely. In my experience playing the deck, I really wanted to untap with a Zimone that had counters on her, so I found myself only casting her with a Silk Guard or Tyvar Stand in hand. Even cast where X equals 0, they trigger your commander and ensure that you can get her benefits right away. The first X spell that you cast with her out gets no benefits though, which is sad. That's a spin up that I mentioned that this deck requires. You really need at least 2 X cost spells to start seeing the benefits from Zimone. In playing, I did find that, if left alone, the deck can pop off with some big value plays. If I'm rebuilding the deck from scratch, I'd lean even harder into X-cost spells and X-cost counter spells to ensure a bigger pop for my X-cost creatures and sorceries when my turn comes back around. I know some folks will be itching to add flash enablers to their decks to allow them to cast those X-cost creatures and sorceries on each other player's turn, getting Zimone's effect for each. But those same players will be the ones complaining that it takes even longer to get their deck off the ground than it does right now. You're going to end up having to win the game through combat damage either way, unless you look to include some infinite combos into the list. So let's recommend 1 or 2 in particular. First of all, good old Walking Ballista. Yes, we broke Walking Ballista again. This X-cost creature is often the cornerstone of infinite combos thanks to its damage potential. And if we can pair it with a Hardened Scales, or Benevolent Hydra, or Ozolith the Shattered Spire, or Kami of Whispered Hopes, all already in the base list, then we can see a line where putting 2 counters on it at once gives you ammunition for the Ballista to survive removing a counter to deal damage and get more counters. So if we have a Vigor in play, the Ballista can remove one of its counters to deal 1 damage to itself, Vigor preventing that damage, and putting 2 more counters on it. We can scale that up infinitely until we can remove enough counters to ping down each opponent. If you're looking to add in Vigor and Walking Ballista, I'd remove the Dika and Quandrix command from the base list to make room for these 2. I've also seen people adding in Simic Ascension to the base list, which is fair and valid, though I like this more as an alternate win-con option in a deck led by Primo rather than Zimone, largely due to the fact that Primo is more reliably able to create creatures with counters than Zimone is. But it is a valid option if you want a non-combat way to win the game. Now, while I don't rate this Precon quite as high as some of the others, I think it still does work and can fit at most tables and most Precon level games. Lay low, build up Zimone, and hit them with some wacky X-cost spells. But what do you think of the Quandrix Unlimited Precon? How does it rate? How does it compare to the other Secrets of Strixhaven Precons? And how did you upgrade it? Be sure to let me know in those comments. And don't leave without checking out my sponsors like Card Conduit. They are hands down the easiest way to sell your individual Magic cards without the hassle of traditional buy listing. They'll get you top dollar while handling all of the heavy lifting, from sorting to grading to optimizing your price across a huge network of vendors. And they'll give you cold hard cash for it. You can use the promo code MECHANIC right now for 10% off of all fees. And if you want to pick up the cards for this list, make sure to go check out Card Trader. Use my promo code MECHANIC right now for 5% off your order from any TCG. Card Trader's zero system means you can get cards from all over the world with only 1 shipping fee. Save money and time today. Lastly, you can check out all of my decks on MOXFIELD. MOXFIELD is the best deck building platform in the world and makes it easy to build decks and search for specific cards with their powerful tools. Have you checked out their drag and drop feature yet? It's revolutionary. Be sure to check out my brews and follow my profile there right now. If you were inspired to brew today, you have to hit that subscribe button. Check out this other deck on my channel right now for more sweet tech. And as always folks, good luck and have fun.